morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. I know we are joining from different parts of the world. I would like to welcome you to the first AgriDENZ Qinisa webinar on charting the course for agricultural GAG research in Africa. My name is Craig Chibanda. I'm an agricultural economist at the Tuning Institute in Germany and also the AgriDENZ work package leader for third country engagements. As most of you already know, AgriDENZ is a bilateral cooperation project between Germany and New Zealand, which is focusing in the area of agriculture and climate change. And we are working in different aspects, including third country engagements, which is why we are here. So I'll be moderating today's webinar, and I would like to welcome all our speakers, our panelists, and all participants joining us online. As many of you know, in May 2025, AgriDENZ and the Qinisa initiative, together with international and regional partners, hosted a regional science policy dialogue in Pretoria, South Africa. The event brought together over 90 participants, which included farmers, agribusinesses, policymakers, researchers, and different partners to shape a shared research agenda on agricultural greenhouse gas emissions in Southern Africa. That dialogue sparked strong collaboration and commitment to action, and the resulting report, which I believe all of you already received because it's now available, captures the key insights and recommendations for moving forward. Today's webinar will share highlights from the report, followed by reflections from thematic experts and a Q&A session. Please post your questions in the chat as the webinar progresses, and we will have time to address these questions during the Q&A, or we'll respond to them in the chat. This webinar is being recorded and will be available later on the AgriDENZ website as well as the Qinisa website. Thank you for joining us today. And now I'll take the pleasure to introduce a distinguished speaker, Professor Chelele, who will present a brief summary of the report. Professor Chelele is a distinguished researcher currently serving in the Department of Agriculture and Animal Health at the University of South Africa, UNISA. He is also affiliated with the Agricultural Research Council in Pretoria. Prof, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning, colleagues, and great appreciation to Dr. Mwape, as well as Dr. Florence and yourself for affording me an opportunity to share the report. I believe everyone has gone through the report, but those who may have not gone through it extensively, I was given an opportunity to do that on your behalf and just summarize what we have discussed, but most importantly, what do we do with this report? We are confronted with very tough questions by various stakeholders, and it is important for us to reflect. And one of them is, whose research agenda are we addressing? Are we doing our own things, or are we addressing real life challenges that are a pain to communities, to farmers, to the to the industry? And it is for that reason that this gathering was convened in May 2025 in Pretoria, so that we can then include everyone to say, how should we charter the way forward in terms of the agricultural greenhouse gas emission? And among others, it was agreed that the GHG research and climate action in Africa must be locally driven and must also be inclusive. But most importantly, it must be impact oriented. And that means that we can't just continue with the status of doing research that benefit us, whereas we are not doing research for ourselves. And that is followed by the fact that this initiative, it is going to be, farmer and community-centric, research and innovation process. And that will then qualifies the fact that, we are not doing it for ourselves, but farmers and communities as well as other, role players, are part and parcel. Hence, everyone else was included, on day one. But it was also, agreed, all these things that I'm saying are coming from the delegates who were there on the day, that it must be a systemic and coordinated approach to ensure that, context-specific priorities are addressed. At the moment, a lot of good work is done, but it is not coordinated. And as a result, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to measure, the impact, if at all, that we're doing, because we are working, in different silos, in silos. And we also agreed that we require a decisive shift towards African ownership, particularly with regards to the climate agenda, but most importantly, to ensure that the IKS, Indigenous Knowledge System, are part and parcel of this process, because we know that farmers and communities, have used, IKS in solving some of the problems, and therefore that can be ignored and or left behind. But most importantly is that everything that we are doing needs to be aligned with the national priorities, because we are not doing this work in isolation. But for all these things to be successful and sustainable, it is important that the continent as agricultural GHG researcher agenda, it's considered. That will assist us to transform and sustain this very good initiative that has started. During the 2 days, there were 4, parallel sessions or breakaway sessions, and one of them was the soil health. And what I'm going to do is just to paint a picture of some of the, pointers or very important point that came of the, the breakaway sessions. And the very first point, cut across. So even though I may not have, written it in the following slides, but it is very pivotal to, all the, the research priorities. One is to ensure that we prioritize food security as a central outcome, as opposed to climate mitigation strategy. And what this simply means is that a farmer in some rural area should, one way or another benefit in terms of the various agricultural activities that they're embarking on, as opposed as scientists, to put in the forefront climate mitigation strategies. That is important for us, but it will not cut off, for the farmers. And it is for that reason that this group came up with this, which was adopted, across all the research priorities. But 2 is to align the soil organic carbon research with farmers' priorities. This also talks to ensure that farmers and communities must be at the central point in terms of the challenges and priorities that they are faced with on a daily basis. And the breakaway session on the soil health also indicated that it must focus on nutrient cycling, the structure and the microbial health, among others, such that we make inroads or impact that will then be relevant to everyone else or to all the stakeholders. But it was also indicated that it is critical to increase soil organic matter so that we can improve the water infiltration and retention, which is currently a problem not just in the soil health, but also, for instance, with the planted pasture and even the rangeland, or what is commonly known in South Africa as a veld. But one of the big problems is land degradation, which is such a huge problem, and it is purported to be around 60%, particularly in this communal rangeland space in South Africa. And therefore, reversing land degradation and improving productivity, particularly of smallholder farmers who are in the main, affected by this is critical. And to also ensure that, the research that is done, it's context-specific guidance, and it's guided on land management practices that can also increase the soil organic carbon levels. But the second point is the livestock systems. And bear with me if I am rushing this. This is just really to give a summary so that we can have some more reflections. The livestock system breakaway session or group raised a few points, among others, to ensure that there is an integrated and interdisciplinary research approach, which is very critical because this is not just a livestock systems, but it cuts across animal health, agricultural economics, and you name them. And therefore, it is important to ensure that the entire system is coordinated and it cut across. But most importantly, once again, the issue of system-specific innovation pathways came through, just to give an example, to ensure that there's improved genetics, feed additives, and so on and so forth. And the animal health and emission reduction was also one of the critical points, because it is known that if diseases are reduced, that can also enhance productivity as well as the gut greenhouse gas emissions. But to also improve the genetic material for climate resilience and mitigation, for instance, heat tolerance given the extreme temperatures that we are experiencing, as well as improving feed efficiency. And as I've mentioned, these are just some of the snapshots, and the report details everything that was discussed during the day. But it's also important to look at the feed and nutrition innovation, particularly in the context of climate resilience. The third breakaway session or group looked at cropping systems, and one of the key points, which I think is very important, is to enhance the agroforestry efficiencies with the aim of exploring rangeland, crops, and animal interaction. That is also looking across the whole spectrum as opposed to only within the cropping system, and thereby developing an integrated pathway. But second point also that the group reflected on was to look at to reflect on a system that is based on a based approach to improve the productivity, the sustainability, as well as the environmental performance of the cropping systems. But to also use the cover crops, particularly if you think of this, hence there's a need to look at the whole spectrum. The rangeland degradation is quite a big problem, and that tells you that there's definitely going to be, feed shortages, both in terms of quality and quantities. Therefore, the use of cover crops, conservation agriculture, will then contribute to methane reduction, techniques, as well as, of course, breeding drought-tolerant forages is also, paramount. And coming to the rangeland and pasture science, which is one of the breakaway sessions that I was part of. Is there someone talking? There were a number of pointers indeed that were mentioned. Among others, is to ensure that effective greenhouse gas emission research and climate mitigation strategies that address real life and farmer challenges and priorities. And you may remember that this also came from the other breakaway session. That talks to the fact that we should move. There should be a paradigm shift to say the research that will be done in this space, it's not happening out of a vacuum, but also to link the carbon sequestration research with productivity, sustainable feed system, as well as land regeneration and or rehabilitation in the context of the rate and extent of land degradation. And this will also ensure that farmers are central to this work that we do. And as a result of that, there will be a buy-in, most definitely. But to also have a multifunctional approach to rangeland management, drought-resilient forages, tree-based fodder systems, and Namibia is already advanced in this regard. And once again, in the process to also integrate, indigenous knowledge system as part of the whole package. But to also address rangeland degradation, it's coming over and over given how problematic it is, so that we can manage the overgrazing and undergrazing systems, particularly in communal rangeland system. I mean, this concept has been talking about for many years to come. So there were some actions and recommendations that came about from this report, which were our actions and recommendations, and not only of those who put together the report. And among others, that includes to adopt an interdisciplinary food systems approach, and that will ensure that the system it's inclusive in nature, but also looks at regional and global food supply chains. But to use holistic methods that integrate diverse knowledge and data, including the indigenous knowledge system. That comes from the fact that there's a lot of work, once again, that has been done out there. And it is important that we, it is, once again, an interdisciplinary approach. But there's an element, or one of the actions is the leverage on the data and digital technologies. Once again, that comes from the fragmentation and lack of a validated greenhouse gas emission research agenda, which also incorporate, financing, but most importantly, the monitoring and evaluation of the mitigation and adaptation. This will help us to ensure that we're not just doing this for the fun of it, or the fact that it's one of our research interests, but to ensure that the progress or no progress, if that may be, which I do not foresee, that it is monitored and evaluated, so that if there's a need for us to relook at some of the systems, we then do that. But the third point is to strengthen research ecosystem. In the main, resources are limited, and it is important, therefore, that if the entire research ecosystem is looked at, we will then be able to share infrastructure, but at the same time build capacity for agricultural greenhouse gas emission. And the fourth point is to align research priorities with farmers and industry. So this keeps coming, and it is therefore that the farmers and the industry at large must be central, to this work. And fortunate enough, the organizers of this great initiative ensured that all the critical, stakeholders are important. And the second last point is to ensure that there's a clear value proposition. If we have got a very clear, we communicate a very clear proposition, it is highly likely that all stakeholders, will come on board, particularly where they see themselves in terms of how do they benefit on their farming activities, but to also, make an awareness in terms of climate, environmental, core benefits linked with improving production efficiency. Very important point. And lastly, on the slide, to promote continued collaboration so that we can produce knowledge, data, and information that is farmer, centric. We can have very good documents, have very good deliberations. We can meet timeously, but at the end of the day, it is important to ask our questions of so what? We've had all these great inputs from the different stakeholders, but it is important that we agree on activities that are going to be done. This is not a casting stone, but I thought, having read, going through the documents and putting together the slides, I should, make propositions which can be during the discussion. One is that we are acknowledging that there's a lot of work that is done in the agricultural greenhouse gas emission across the region. The second point was to develop, interdisciplinary research approaches. These are just some of the ideas that I thought, I could, throw on the floor for discussion. And to identify sites, this is very important. at various institutions, being it the Science Council, university, and you name them, to establish long-term agricultural greenhouse gas emission research or use already what is existing, but to really formalize it. And I was also thinking of a, Southern African agricultural greenhouse gas emission conference to share the work that has been done already in the context of the various priorities that have been mentioned. But most importantly, when things are left to a chance without a steering committee, some of the things could fall into the cracks, and therefore, putting together a steering committee on this great initiative could be of a great, assistance to ensure that, the work is coordinated and make progress. And with those few words, Chair, thank you very much. That's just the summary of our report. Greatly appreciated.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Chelele, for that concise and insightful presentation. So for those that joined us when Prof had just started his presentation, so the two objectives of this webinar is to first to touch base on what went through the policy science dialogue that we had in Pretoria early this year. So Prof has already given us a good overview of the main takeaway messages in the report. And then the next objective is to build on the momentum that was created from this policy science dialogue by having concrete actions or initiatives at least in the next year. So Prof has already mentioned in his last slide some proposal of how do we continue to build on this momentum. So in the next session, which is a panel reflection, we are going to have 4 panelists that are going to be first providing their reflections on the report, and then also looking at some of the steps forward in terms of actions that we can take. And I mean we, because we want this to be collaborative. So it's not only Qinisa or AgriDENZ, but we want ownership of the group. So we'll have 4 speakers. First, we'll begin with Dr. Jerry Dlamini from Northwest University in South Africa. Then he'll be followed by Safira Ashipala from the Ministry of Agriculture, Water and Land Reform in Namibia. And then we'll have Dr. Lindy Detour from the University of Pretoria. And finally, we'll have Dr. Neva Mwambela from Plant Biodefenders in Tanzania. So our speakers will have 4 to 5 minutes, and we'll start with Dr. Jerry Dlamini. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for attending. When I was given 4 to 5 minutes to reflect on the science policy dialogue, I thought, where do I start? Because there's quite a lot of work that we need to do in order for us to actually action on the recommendations of the science policy dialogue. So what we found particularly on the cropping system side, we found that there is a real need, because if you look at highly radiative gases like nitrous oxide that comes from cropping systems, including like cropping system practices, including fertilization, there is scant data in the region. When the scant data, how do we make sure that we implement systems that are actually reducing to these gases? When they reduce these gases, but the question is, what is it that is available for the measurements at first? So when we find out the inventory of what is available for measurements, University of Pretoria, what equipment do they have? Northwest University, what equipment do they have? Then we can do a baseline of the measurements. From a cropping and soil systems, then we can explore a number of mitigation measures under specific conditions. For instance, in Namibia, how will that look like? And must we test nitrification inhibitors? Must we test different cropping systems? So the first step is to understand the extent. Then secondly, we then test the different systems that can potentially reduce the emissions. Thank you, Chair. I hope I didn't exhaust my 5 minutes.
No, you used them quite effectively. In fact, you had 1 more minute to go. But thanks so much, Dr. Jerry Lamini, for those short and concise inputs. I would like to just mention to our participants that we'll also give them time to also have their reflections and also propose some concrete steps forward after these panel discussions. So they can continue putting the questions in the chat, but we are also going to have an open session after this panel discussion. So now we move to Safira Ashapala from the Ministry of Agriculture, Water and Land Reform in Namibia. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good morning to you all. I'm wondering if I'm going to be operating in the time frame which we were given, but my contribution to this is that member state to continue with their activity data so that at the end, please, are you hearing me?
Yes, we are. We can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. It's also for us as member state or African per se or SADC that we continue with the collection of our specific emission activity data for us to have our own emission factors. As Dr. said, there is a need for us as researchers, as stakeholders, to have a one-stop shop for our emission or activities to be TAC, as we said. TAC stands for transparency, accuracy. The main point which I wanted to make to bring is the comparable, so that our data, emission data, can be compared with even within our member state. We know that members are already, some of the members, they are ahead with different activity data, but those ones, as the previous speaker said, we are just operating in silos, where sometimes we might not shop on the right place. So there is a need, as the previous speaker said, so that we can have a one-stop shop. In addition to the feed intake, which is specific for livestock, we know that there are some member states, either academia, who are ahead. So I don't think there is a need for us to invent the wheel if there is already a guidelines which we said we can compare, or we can use the activity data from neighboring countries or African countries. So we feel like if we just take stock what is available, what is other member states are doing, from there we can have a one-stop shop which can be used by all member states. I thank you.
Thank you so much. So I think the issue of destroying the silos, coming together continues to come up. So I think this is something that it came up also in the discussions we had in South Africa. And it's important that we also think of how do we destroy these silos. I think this is a very important point because it continues to come up. Anyway, we move on to our next speaker, Dr. Lindy Ditwe from the University of Pretoria. Please, you have the floor.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Craig, for this opportunity. I think going through the report and listening to Prof. Jalele, it's clear that there's a common goal across the whole Southern African region. And the goal is to have standardized methodologies, to have quality of data, and to have accessibility of data. And the other thing that came through very clearly to me is that it's important to have systems approaches. And that's probably one way to try and get rid of the silos, is to look at the whole system and not just a aspect within the system. So almost sort of like a value chain approach. I think more specifically to livestock, over the past 3 to 5 years, there has been projects to identify activity data gaps And I think that's very low-hanging fruit going forward over the next 24 months for AgriDENZ and the whole Qinisa projects, is to, if we know what the data gaps are, let's start filling those gaps. And those gaps are not hard to fill. It's diet quality, forage quality data across seasons, across regions, livestock activity data that, as has been mentioned, live weight changes across commercial, communal, and smallholder farming systems. And what are the breed compositions or the herd compositions, what breeds are used. I think that's data that might be available out there. It's just not been mined yet. So I don't think it's going to be a lot of effort to try and fill these gaps. And I think that's where we need to start. If you have quality data there, we can have quality emission factor calculations. And then, as has been said, we do have equipment in Pretoria, in Northwest, at other universities, the ARC, where we can then start to validate these emission factors to see how accurate we are. Once we've got accurate baselines, we can start looking at identifying best practices to improve efficiency and thus reduce emissions intensity. Looking at different breeds, breeding plans, incorporating indigenous breeds through to improve adaptability, improve resilience, working with the soil and the pasture cluster to identify forage plants or species that can be used that might have methane mitigation activity. I think there's a lot of forage sources, brush sources, that can be used in cut and carry systems to reduce emissions. And lastly, I think funding is a cross-cutting systems problem. Not only funding of students and getting the students to the projects, but funding the research itself for an extended period of time is one of the issues across systems and across all the pillars, looking at AgriDENZ and Qinisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindy, for that concise and insightful presentation. I think you have already gone into some of the concrete steps like previous speakers in terms of activities that we can look at and the low-hanging fruits that we can take advantage of. Now we'll move to Dr. Neva Mwambela, who is our last panelist, who is giving us reflections. So she's with the Plant Biodefenders in Tanzania. Dr. Neva, you have the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Craig. So my summary or my take home from the presentation is that the emphasis is made on interdisciplinarity, inclusivity, sustainability, and impactiveness of research. So as private sector, as innovative startup, so I have a take home or recommendation on three priorities. When we talk about agricultural system, so here I see as industry or innovation sector, in food security, we have to focus on innovation that emphasize the use of microbes, including the use of biopesticide, biofertilizer, to improve food production. Because in your presentation, it shows that food security is highly prioritized, but the emphasis is on influential microbes that will retain soil activity and also retain sustainability and availability of food. So to increase this one, we have to adopt it and also maximize on the use of microbes for industrial production so that we can control pests, especially on food crops, so that we ensure food security by using safe products and also ensure sustainability of food production. And also biofertilizer that does not include the use of manure that is also associated with the methane production. So as a private sector, so we are working on this and we have this product that are working here in Tanzania. Maybe we can scale to other countries depending on the research priority that you are focusing. Again, on livestock, from our plant biodefenders also, we see the main issue here also is the use of pesticide for control from vectors like ticks. Ticks is very common for our livestock keeper in most of African countries. And management of ticks is also by using these fluoride-based pesticide that have impact on greenhouse gases and also have impact on soil, affecting carbon sequestration by the soil due to this synthetic pesticide spray. So for our case, we have products that can control it that are microbial. So even if they drop in soil, they retain soil fertility and also control this pest or whatever without harming. Third, about cropping system, you have prioritized on agroforestry and also post-harvesting processing. So from industrial or from business perspective, to ensure that these are productive to small holder farmers and also are sustainable, I suggest that this agroforestry should prioritize on beneficial trees like having fruit trees that farmers can harvest and at the end, while they can also help to squeeze the carbon, also having herbal trees that they, like moringa and others, that they can harvest and utilize the product from this tree. And for coffee, for instance, and other trees, they can intercrop with the short-term crops like beans so that to make it sustainable. And this shouldn't be just ending in research, should be into real practice, and farmers should be trained. And perishable crops like vegetable, tomato, farmers at their own capacity should be facilitated to process so that they can preserve and add value for income generation and also to ensure that the farming system benefit farmers. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our four panelists. So we had different perspectives. So we had panelists from research, panelists from agribusiness, Dr. Neva, who just spoke, representing the private sector, and we also had panelists from the policymakers, Dr. Safiria from the ministry in Namibia. So now we would like to go to an open audience discussion. But before doing this, I would like to just talk about what AgriDENZ or Qinisa could possibly do in terms of concrete activities in the next year in terms of moving this agenda forward. Akim, may you share the slides?
Thank you.
Okay. So I will just briefly speak on AgriDENZ, and then my colleague, Dr. Florence Chokuda, will also talk about what Qinisa plans to do in terms of moving this agenda forward. So as many of you already know, AgriDENZ, which I mentioned before, is a bilateral cooperation project between Germany and New Zealand, which is being led by the two ministries. So from the New Zealand side, we have the Ministry of Primary Industries, and the German side, we have the German Federal Ministry of Agriculture, Food, and Regional Identities. So the focus of this bilateral project is to really further cooperation and research in the area of agriculture and climate change, of which there is a third pillar that I mentioned, which is going beyond these two countries and focusing on what we call third countries, particularly those in the global south. And under this pillar, we have some activities which fall under the bracket of fostering policy science dialogue. And this is the reason why we are having this webinar, and we also had the policy science dialogue in South Africa. So I think this is something that as AgriDENZ will continue to foster. So dialogue, presenting of results through either series of webinars or side events, of which we also recently had one in Kenya during the GGAA conference, and we hope that next year we continue to provide this space for dialogue, and hope moving forward, this dialogue could be more specific. So focusing on specific thematic areas, it could be, for example, focusing on the livestock sector. So if you look at that chart that Dr. Akim Mwape just shared, so we will continue to focusing on fostering exchange through either policy dialogues, webinars, or thematic side events, and this will continue to consult each other with Qinisa on some of the topics that we would focus on, and specifically for the webinars, which we'd really want to now go deeper into specific areas, would come back and consult you on which topics we would want to really focus on for the webinar series. So that's briefly some of the things that we think we could do in the next year. So now I'll pass on to Dr. Florence Chokuda, who is working with Qinisa, and she'll provide more insights in terms of the program that Qinisa has for the next year. Dr. Florence, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Craig, and all the speakers that we had that have brought a lot of reconnection with the engagements that have started in the past 3 to 4 years. For most of you, 90% that are on the platform, I believe you're now very familiar with the call to strengthening agriculture GHG research in Southern Africa. We want to acknowledge the multiple stakeholders that have already been working in this space. I think for some, maybe beyond 10 years. I recognize some of the members here, like Professor Meisner and also Mahil schools that have been stalwarts, which means we have a lot of forerunners already on this in this space. And what we are all dealing with is issues of change management, really, from the side of some researchers, institutions, and also even the primary producers, because of the issue of convenience. As I was listening to Neva, who is coming from the private sector, she's talking about a change in what we need to use in terms of pesticides. But there's a lot of convenience when I run into the vet store and I just pick up the synthetic pesticide. I don't want to struggle with a lot of things. And so that resistance requires a lot of social change that's associated with it. I want to applaud everybody that is on the platform for actually being at the front of this initiative. So we need to strengthen one another in breaking the silos and taking opportunity of the gaps that we have identified in the process. So I'll be very quick to look at some of the key focal areas, 3 things that have come through from this engagement via Qinisa. For 2026 going forward, those are the key areas that we, as Qinisa, which includes yourselves because you are the network. Qinisa is not an office. It is this network, the platform. It's looking at partnership strengthening and knowledge alignment. So this picks up on one of the key things that has come through. We need to be engaging at a regional or continental level through the dialogues. And hence, we will be hosting in October 2026. We have already started with this webinar in preparation, what we call the Africa-wide Innovation Symposium. So I think you can save the time, the date on your diaries to bring about or to consolidate the discussions that we're talking about here. And then the second component will be looking at capacity development for climate action. Of course, when you say break silos, when there is a call to say, how can we strengthen what institutions are already doing? That requires technical strengthening. That will require a lot of training, including training call for the farmers, training for policymakers as well, where Sarafia and others are sitting, where they say, member states need to continue, but that requires capacitation. Hence, we need our partners, whether they're in the global north or also global south. No wonder we have AgriDENZ that has come in as part of this process. The key things that are also coming through are issues of how do we harness what is now being called the wild west of carbon markets, and looking at also the management or the sequestration of carbon so that carbon can also be utilized, and also mitigation in terms of losses of nitrogen that is so expensive to bring down, but we let it go. The third component will look at funding to make things happen. It's not only funding for research for students. Research itself requires funding, and also coordination and administration requires funding. The data that we need to be sharing, centralized data, you need creation of a data platform. I think that speaks to point number one. And hence we are looking at bringing in or supporting postdoctoral students that could be within your institutions, looking at resource mobilization that can go towards building those. So we need the oil, but then we need long-term research support. So we are looking at, from the science dialogue, they termed it the GHG Research Endowment Fund long-term. So in terms of real activities that are on the ground that are linked to those broad areas, we under capacity building, as we run the Africa-wide conference next year, October 2026, we'll be looking at bringing this knowledge sharing that includes entrepreneurs. We need to have business people coming through. We need to have the different international organizations coming through and using the same opportunity possibly to do training and build capacities. So I've shared on this one, the blue one, because it's one of the key deliverables that we think will make a big impact and build our networks starting 2026. In terms of strengthening research, this is talent and research development. That's where we are looking at supporting the postdoctoral fellows, and we're looking for research funding and connecting with institutions that are working on whether it's crop systems, soil systems, or the livestock systems, and building the GHG data platform. In terms of piloting work as well, scaling up what is already ongoing. We have joined hands with the Beef Genomics project that is being spearheaded by ARC and the LRF, and we hope that this will be rolled out into the SADC countries. And then also we have joined hands in the coordination and implementation of the soil health and fertilizer strategy through CADESA. The hub was launched in August 2025 this year. So that's part of the work that we'll be doing that is related to generating data and also closing the gaps and looking at those inventories. So in a nutshell, I'm sure we'll also be hearing some of the suggestions that will be coming from this platform to look at how they can fit into activities, the four broad categories. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Florence, for that highlight of activities that Qinisa is going to be doing. And as Dr. Florence mentioned, that Qinisa is not an office, but Qinisa is the network. So the people here are Qinisa. And to build on this concept, now as we open the question and answer segment, I would like to also highlight two things. So the first thing that we hope to get from this question and answer segment is your reflections on the report or the discussions that we had today. And then the second part is we hope to get some proposals of concrete steps, initiatives, or actions that we can do in the next year. So, for example, if you're working in academia and you have a summer school next year, which is related to the work that we are doing in Qinisa, it would be interesting to see how we can leverage these activities that are already planned in your institutions so that we continue to build on this momentum. So now I'll open up the space for questions, reflections, and contributions. So maybe Dr. Akim, you help me with this part because I cannot see everyone's hand. So please, you can raise your hand, then Akim will ensure that you can speak. Okay, so I see
Mr. Mulunda Mwila has got his hand up.
Okay, you can go ahead, please. Mr. Mwila, I think you are unmuted. Please go ahead. We cannot hear you at the moment. Maybe as we wait for Mr. Mwila to sort out his technicals, Neva Mwambela, is that a question? I see that your hand is also raised. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Dr. Craig, for the opportunity and the highlights from Dr. Florence Sarafia, I think. Yeah. So you mentioned that there will be funding for research and also for data to share information, whatever. So my request, as we are moving into disciplinarity and inclusivity, so as a startup that are struggling to work on this greenhouse emission in Africa, Plant Biodefender is one, and there are others who are working maybe in other countries. So my request is in this funding opportunity, please include this startup because they are not big companies. They are struggling to work on innovations that is assisting in emission and mitigation of greenhouse gases. So it will be an encouragement step if we see even this startup like Plant Biodefender and others, we are part of this funding or support so that we can reach more people in this innovation that are not much familiar with the smaller farmers, and also we are not much big in terms of investment and funding opportunities. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Neva Mwambela. I take that as a comment. So we take that on board, that it's important when we have calls for research funding that we also incorporate not only research institutes, but we try to collaborate with startups to have collaborative research and to also strengthen small startups like what Neva mentioned. So Molundi Mwela, your hand is still up. May you please try to go again? Okay, I see that you are unmuted. Please go ahead. We still cannot hear you, unfortunately.
There's a question from Showman on the chat box.
Okay, it's quite a long question. Does Showman want to jump in and elaborate on his question? Showman, would you like to jump in? Otherwise, we'll have to, yeah.
Thank you. Yes, it's sort of a suggestion where I am suggesting that amongst the priority areas that were identified, maybe there is need to start with a characterization of the production systems as the emission sources, because you would realize that one of the challenges we have is the quality of the data that we are using to come up with our emission estimates. And the protocols that we are using are a result of a not sufficient appreciation of the behavior of our production systems as emission sources. So if we can have a robust characterization of our emission sources, I would give an example. You estimate a greenhouse gas emission from cattle production systems. People collect data for just one season in a tropical production system, and they use those activity data matrices to estimate emissions for the entire period of 365 days. So if we can maybe engage in robust research programs that try to characterize our systems in terms of how they behave as emission sources. Thank you.
Thank you, Showman, for that contribution. I completely agree with you. We are also at the Tuning Institute work a lot on production systems, so this is something that I also identify with, and we'll take that note down for the report that we are also going to do for this for this webinar. So we are also taking down notes, and we'll share this. I think this is an important point to include. So we still have two more hands up. We have Akabongo Mukutumba. Please, you have the floor. You may go ahead.
Yeah, good morning. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Yeah, perfect. Yes, yeah. So first of all, I'd like to acknowledge, I think there was a comment from one of the presenters of the need for long-term data. And I think that's one of the critical aspects we are really missing. And I think we really need to kind of work on that. And I think to do that, we also need a few, yes, this is a regional network, but I think we do need strong in-country coordination and networks to feed into that regional. As you know, I think there are a few countries in the region that will be doing much better than others. In some of the countries, that coordination is quite weak. In Zambia, for example, I think we can do better. So I think we need to find a way of strengthening these in-country networks and research and identifying institutions on the ground that have the capacity to host these long-term trials beyond students and so on, because that's what really I think we need in the long term. So let's identify these institutions in each country that can host these long-term experiments, trials, and then see how we can support so they can feed into that national data and eventually into that regional data. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that contribution. Now I'll go back also to the second question. So we have these four areas that we talked about: livestock, crops, landscapes, and soils. So I strongly believe that these are areas that we are already working in our institutions in some way. So I would really hope if we can get some more insights on how can we leverage the work that you're doing in your institutions, whether it's events, conferences, research. What do you have planned next year that we can? This I think would be really good if we get some few insights on this from the audience. Does anybody want to take up? I think we still have time for one or two. Otherwise, you can always email Akim or Dr. Florence on these initiatives. So we have time for two more questions. Or inputs. Okay, if not, then I think we'll move to the last part of our webinar, which we'll be passing on to Dr. Akim Mwape from also the AgriDENZ project and Qinisa and also the GRA Secretariat to outline the next steps from this webinar. So what comes next, or what is the way forward, and maybe a bit of his reflections before we close the webinar. Dr. Akim Mwape, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Craig and colleagues, for those insightful contributions that we've just had. I think what I'm hearing from everyone's contributions is that we need a bold and new era of international research cooperation and collaboration. And I think the foundations for this paradigm shift are already taking place from what we are hearing from everyone. And now is just the time to see how we can build on them, strengthen these partnerships, and accelerate research actions. I think this is going to require governments, researchers, and development partners to come together to design innovative financing and governance mechanisms where the private sector, multilateral agencies, and national development banks could co-invest in solutions that we could use to reduce agriculture GHG emissions whilst also increasing productivity and improving livelihoods. Suggestions about the upcoming Africa-wide Agriculture GHG Research and Innovation Symposium, I think, are welcome. And along with the interactive webinars that AgriDENZ has suggested, I think these are also going to be very useful in making sure that we continue this important conversation. But to truly make an impact, I think we need everyone's voice. We need your voice and your participation. So I think my invitation to you is to join us, share your ideas, come and be part of initiatives that are going to help shape the future of African agriculture and agriculture GHG research and innovation across the continent. Already there's a lot happening. Like Dr. Ikabungo has just mentioned, we need to know what is happening. We need to know where, which research institutions are conducting initiatives or are conducting research in the respective places. But if you keep it to yourself, no one is going to know what you are doing unless you engage. Within this context, I think knowledge sharing and collaboration will be the driving force behind Africa's agricultural transformation. So by getting involved, you will be part of a growing community that is dedicated to discovering groundbreaking solutions that will be able to connect with industry experts and also create lasting change for development or transformation across the continent. So I would just encourage everyone to continue with this collaboration, and let's continue discussing and engaging and always exchanging information and notes in such forums. Thank you very much, Dr. Craig.
So thank you for that wrap up, Dr. Kim, and for that call to action. I would like to take this last minute to just close the webinar and thank all the participants for being on this journey with us. This journey is just beginning, and we have a long way to walk together, as Dr. Akim mentioned. So I would like to thank you all for participating in the first AgriDENZ Qinisa webinar, which was on charting the course for agricultural GHG research in Africa. We'll be posting updates on the AgriDENZ and Qinisa website with complete Q&A records, links to the recordings, and other follow-up information. So we look forward to any ideas for future webinar series content. Please email Dr. Kim or Dr. Florence on any ideas for this. We thank you for participating in this webinar, and we wish you all a good day ahead. Thank you so much, and we look forward to future discussions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Craig.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Cheers. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.